Beneath the twin suns of Zaraka, the citadel of the Velker Dominion cast a long shadow over the molten plains. Massive towers of obsidian and bone reached into the sky like claws, silhouetted against the red-orange dusk. Inside the fortress's inner sanctum, alien Queen Zelvanna stood motionless on her throne, a living structure made of ancient biotech, pulsing faintly with her heartbeat. Her translucent skin shimmered with iridescent blue light, and her eyes, vertical and unblinking, stared ahead with the cold patience of a ruler who had never been defied. A hush fell over the chamber as her pet entered. It was not just a dragon. It was the dragon, Vorthix, the WY of worlds, the Queen's apex creation. Towering 20 feet high at the shoulder, its wings furled like obsidian curtains, and its armor-plated scales gleamed with veins of glowing plasma. Rumors told of entire star colonies annihilated by this beast at her command. The nobles gathered dared not speak. They had seen this thing incinerate traitors with a blink. Today's display was for intimidation. As Vorthix moved with deadly grace toward the ceremonial platform, a Terran prisoner was dragged into the chamber. Small, soot-stained, and limping, he stood in sharp contrast to the immaculate symmetry of the alien throne room. His face bore the rough stubble of survival, and his clothing, a patchwork of repurposed engineering gear, hung in torn folds around his frame. Queen Zelvanna's voice was low and smooth. The human mechanic. You are Theo Cray. Theo wiped blood from the corner of his mouth, glancing upward at the queen. So it's true. You people do love your pageantry. Murmurs flared from the assembly. Insolence from a Terran was rare. Survival after capture, rarer still. Zelvanna stepped down from her throne, each movement measured and elegant. You speak with no fear. That is uncommon among your species. Fear wastes energy, Theo replied, his voice dry. And I need every bit of it to fix whatever junk pile you throw me into. The queen's gaze sharpened. You are not here to repair. You are here to observe the consequences of disobedience. With a subtle hand gesture, she directed Vorthix forward. The dragon growled, a sound more felt than heard, a seismic shift in the air that rattled stone. Theo held his ground. Even as Vorthix lowered its head to meet him eye to eye, Theo didn't blink. There was a moment, brief, almost imperceptible, when something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or curiosity. Vorthix's pupils dilated, its breathing slowed. It did not lunge. It did not roar. It simply watched. Zelvanna tilted her head. Curious. You smell familiar to it. Theo said nothing. But he too noticed it. The dragon hadn't tried to kill him. In fact, it looked almost calm. The queen gestured again, and the guards dragged him away toward the lower levels of the palace. The demonstration was over, but the tension remained like a storm waiting to break. In the days that followed, Theo found himself relegated to the sub-engineering levels beneath the citadel. 1,000 floors below the throne room, he was surrounded by machinery older than the Velker Dominion itself. Twisted conduits, inactive energy cores, and rusted fusion drives littered the labyrinthine vaults. To his surprise, they let him work. It wasn't freedom, not really. He was under constant surveillance, flanked by silent drone sentinels that tracked his every move. But they allowed him access to ancient systems, which he quickly realized were not Velkarian in origin. They were Terran. Not modern Earth tech, but ancient pre-Exodus models. Theo had grown up on stories of old Earth, of a time before humanity scattered across the stars like dust. He knew this machinery. His fingers remembered the shapes, the codes, the logic buried in layered circuits. Some of the devices bore serial tags in languages the Velkarians likely couldn't even translate. He began to wonder, How much of the Velker Dominion's terrifying power was inherited rather than invented? On the third day, he was assigned to recalibrate the thermal coils in the dragon's chamber. The beast rested on a stone platform, curled like a sleeping hurricane. Theo entered cautiously, tools clinking in his satchel. As he worked, he spoke aloud, not to anyone in particular. A habit from years alone in the void. Someone sure put a lot of effort into you. He muttered, glancing toward Vorthix. Modulated plasma breath. Reinforced spine structure. Bet your thermal sink is overclocked. But you're twitching. The dragon's eye opened. Golden vast, it fixed on him. Theo froze. His wrench hovered mid-turn. All right, he whispered, raising his hand slowly. Not touching anything critical. Promise. The dragon tilted its head. It didn't rise. It didn't growl. He swallowed and resumed working, heart pounding, but a theory began to form. The sensors, the reaction times, even the slight twitch in its wings, they aligned with old Terran engineering principles. He tested a hypothesis. He whistled, 3 short tones, low to high, a common diagnostic cue used by Terran mech servitors. Vorthix responded. It wasn't dramatic, just a small movement. A subtle lift of its head. A deep, thrumming vibration in its chest, matching the tones. Theo blinked. No way. When he tried again, this time using an ancient Terran command phrase embedded in some mech software he'd worked on years ago. System Prime, reset to standby. The dragon exhaled a low breath and laid its head fully down, as if relaxing. It had heard him. More than that, it had obeyed. The chamber's observation lenses whirred faintly. He knew someone was watching. Later that evening, Queen Zalvanna reviewed the footage. Alone in her private chamber, she studied the recording again and again. The dragon, her ultimate weapon, grown in the biolabs of her ancestors and augmented with forbidden tech, had listened to a human, responded to his voice, not hers. She replayed the dragon's gaze, the shift in its body language, the lack of aggression. Unsettling, unacceptable. She summoned her advisors, demanding an explanation. Some suggested coincidence. Others proposed that perhaps the dragon recognized shared genetic material, scraps of ancient human DNA spliced into its design, once believed to be inert. None dared suggest what she was beginning to suspect, that her kingdom's most powerful asset might be loyal to something older than her throne, and perhaps something more dangerous. Back in the mechanics' quarters, a cold chamber lit only by a dying blue glow strip. Theo sat cross-legged, staring at a fragment of code he had extracted from a power core. It wasn't Valkyrian. It was written in something older, something human, and embedded within that code was a name he hadn't heard since childhood stories. Genesis Protocol, Terran Override Authority. He leaned back, stunned. It was impossible. Or rather, it should have been. But the dragon's obedience told a different story. He was no soldier, no chosen one, just a mechanic who knew how machines thought. But he was beginning to realize the implications of what he'd uncovered. The dragon wasn't Valkyrian at all. Not entirely. And if that were true, then neither was the Dominion's strength. The ground shuddered slightly above him, a signal that the Queen was summoning the beast again. Theo stood, dusted off his sleeves, and walked toward the lift. Whatever was coming next, he had to be ready, because the most dangerous creature in the galaxy had listened to him once, and something told him it would again. The dragon obeyed. That truth echoed through the high corridors of the Citadel like a glitch in reality. Theo had seen it, felt it. A single word, uttered in a mechanic's cadence, and the beast, the galaxy's most feared creature, had lowered its head. Not in submission, but in understanding. Queen Zalvanna had watched the same moment through her surveillance lenses, though she betrayed no reaction when Theo was escorted from the chamber. She merely turned, her flowing robes whispering across the polished onyx floor, and vanished into her sanctum, the doors closing behind her like the jaws of some ancient leviathan. Theo, back in his workshop, was burning with questions. He paced the length of the cracked metal table, a crude schematic flickering above a projection node. Lines of unfamiliar code danced across the surface, but he saw patterns. Beneath the layers of alien architecture were traces, faint but present, of something unmistakably Terran. Signal protocols, diagnostics phrased in human linguistic structures, and most of all, the same fail-safe commands used in pre-Exodus drone systems. He hadn't imagined it. Why would a Valkyrian bioweapon respond to human code? He whispered to himself, fingers drumming restlessly. Unless it isn't purely Valkyrian. The door hissed open. A silent drone hovered in, dropping a sealed data crystal onto his table. No explanation. No guards. Just the crystal blinking softly. Theo hesitated, then slotted it into his reader. A schematic unfolded. Not of a weapon, but of vortex. Internal substructure, neural relay pathways, reinforcement grafts, and something else buried deep within its brainstem. A dormant module labeled in fragmented Terran dialect. The words chilled him. Command sync. Genesis link. Human origin required. He leaned back, stunned. Someone in this palace knew the beast was more than biological terror. Knew it carried a buried code, a ghost of ancient humanity built into its bones. But why send this to him? Was it a warning? An invitation? He didn't get long to ponder. A summons arrived shortly after. This time, not from the lower guards or automated drones, but directly from the Queen's own herald. He was to appear in her observatory at dusk. Theo washed the grease from his hands, brushed off the ash that clung to his jacket, and stepped into the lift. It climbed for what felt like hours, the silence pressing in around him. When the doors opened, he found himself in a vast chamber of glass and steel, suspended high above the surface of Zaraka. Stars burned in the sky, some closer than moons. Zalvanna stood at the center, her gaze fixed on the void. She didn't turn as he approached. "You accessed the schematic," she said without preamble. "I did," Theo replied. "You expected I would." A pause. "I needed to confirm something." Theo stepped forward. "That your pet has a mind built by my ancestors?" Now she turned, slowly, her expression unreadable. "I needed to confirm that it responds to you because of a buried instruction. Not because you are special." He smiled faintly. "So we're still clinging to the theory that I'm just a glorified wrench turner who tripped over a switch. I find it preferable to imagining my empire's most powerful weapon answers to a Terran nobody." That stung, but he didn't show it. "You know what bothers me," Theo said, stepping closer. "Why you let me near it in the first place? You knew the risk." Zalvanna's eyes narrowed. "I underestimated your species' stubbornness. I believed you to be simple." "We are simple," he admitted, "until something old wakes up inside us." Silence stretched between them. Outside, one of the moons rose, casting a pale glow through the glass walls. Theo studied her. Not the tyrant now, but the tactician, the ruler trying to hold together a fractured power with legends and fear. "You saw what it did," he said. "You know this doesn't end with me kneeling, or with you pretending nothing changed." "What are you proposing?" she asked coolly. "I'm not proposing anything yet," Theo said. "I'm trying to understand the rules of the game. Who built Vortex? Why does he have Terran code inside him? And what happens if others like me show up?" The Queen's expression flickered. For a second, it looked almost like worry. "There are no others like you." Theo didn't believe her, and from the flicker in her voice, he didn't think she did either. In the days that followed, rumors began to churn like smoke through the palace. Word spread fast in the courts of conquerors, and even faster among those eager to challenge the throne. Some said the queen's control was slipping. Others claimed she had bred a new master for the dragon. None could explain the truth, but speculation, as always, was more dangerous than fact. Meanwhile, Theo returned to the dragon's chamber daily under the guise of maintenance. He studied its reactions, tested vocal tones, even physical gestures. Vorthix watched him with a predator's patience, but its eyes softened in his presence. The beast didn't lower itself, didn't behave like a pet, but it listened. He learned to issue commands gently, not like a superior, but like a partner. Each time, the response was more immediate, more precise. Theo had the growing sense that Vorthix wasn't being trained, it was remembering. On the fifth day, Theo dared a risk. He climbed onto the platform beside the beast, slowly reached forward, and placed a hand against the dragon's flank. Vorthix didn't recoil. Instead, it exhaled slowly, and a rumble vibrated through its chest like a machine booting up after 1,000 years. That night, in the noble chambers, a confrontation erupted. A high-ranking Valkyrian named Wraith accused the queen of diluting the throne's legacy. He demanded that the dragon demonstrate its loyalty by executing the human. The queen agreed to a public test. A grand arena was prepared, a relic of war rituals from a bloodier age. The nobles gathered in rows of violet and silver, eager to see what would unfold. Theo stood alone in the center of the arena as Vorthix was brought in through massive gates. The queen watched from her elevated seat, her expression impassive. A command was spoken, one word, sharp and echoing across the walls. The dragon turned toward Theo, wings twitching, mouth glowing faintly. Theo didn't move. He met the dragon's gaze. "It's your choice," he whispered. A tense moment passed. The nobles leaned forward, breath caught. Then, Vorthix lowered its head and placed it gently beside Theo's feet. The chamber exploded into chaos. Some screamed. Others cheered. A few rose in protest. The queen stood slowly, her eyes locked on Theo's. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply turned to the crowd and said, "Maybe your empire's foundation wasn't what you thought it was." As guards rushed forward, as arguments erupted, and as alliances began to fray, the queen raised her hand. Silence fell. "Let him speak," she said. And just like that, the mechanic became something far more dangerous than a man with a wrench. He became a symbol, and in the eyes of the beast, a master. The queen's command for silence lingered in the air long after the echoes of Vorthix's submission faded. The nobles, stunned into stillness, regarded Theo with a new kind of unease, one that went deeper than contempt. For the first time, he was no longer just a capture mechanic. He was a disruption, a crack in the foundation of their carefully cultivated hierarchy. Theo could feel their eyes on him as he stepped back from the dragon's head, careful not to seem boastful. The heat of the arena, the tension in the crowd, the watching presence of Zalvanna herself, it was all pressing in around him. But Vorthix's calm presence beside him, the low vibration in the dragon's chest, gave him a strange sense of steadiness. He wasn't entirely sure what he was doing. He only knew that something ancient stirred in the bones of this place and in the core of the creature beside him. And whatever had been buried in the past was no longer willing to stay silent. Queen Zalvanna descended from her throne slowly, deliberately. The court watched her every step, uncertain whether this was a march toward punishment or revelation. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes betrayed calculation. She stopped several paces from Theo, her gaze not on him, but on the dragon. "When was the last time you disobeyed me?" she asked the beast softly, almost as if reminiscing. "Never. Not once in over 100 campaigns." Vorthix blinked, unmoving. You didn't hesitate to tear down the fortress moons of the Ethelkin. You bathed the twin cities of Caravan in fire. And yet, her eyes shifted to Theo. A single Terran speaks, and you bow. Theo said nothing. He didn't need to. This moment wasn't about dominance. It was about truth revealing itself. Zalvanna turned her attention back to the gathered nobles. You see what has happened? The beast remembers something none of us can access. A thread in its making that predates even our oldest data. Terran technology, woven into its neural mesh. Her voice remained steady, but there was an edge to it now. We built our power on the bones of the old world. But perhaps we did not fully understand what we inherited. The murmurs returned. This time, they weren't just whispers of scandal. They were questions, dangerous questions, about lineage, legitimacy, and power. Later that night, Theo found himself under guarded escort once again, but this time not to a prison cell or a labor chamber. He was brought to a war archive, a place rarely seen by outsiders, even less so by prisoners. The walls pulsed with ancient memory crystals, each holding echoes of past battles, treaties, and secrets buried under the weight of centuries. Zalvanna stood in the center, alone, her back to him. Do you know what this place is? I can guess, Theo said, cautious. It is our history, and also our burden. Every lie we've told ourselves to survive. She gestured to a crystalline console. This one contains records of the Genesis War, the conflict that ended the Terran core worlds. We believed it to be myth, a way to rationalize the sudden silence from Earth. But now I think it was something else. Theo stepped closer, watching the shifting light within the crystal. They didn't vanish, he said slowly. They scattered, or maybe went deeper, into hiding, into code. Zalvanna nodded. We found ruins, fragments of technology we couldn't replicate, only copy. And when our bioforges failed to match their output, we built hybrids. Biological machines fused with recovered software. Vorthix was the pinnacle of that experiment. He turned to her. You built a god and didn't understand the language it spoke. Her expression didn't change, but her silence spoke volumes. Why are you telling me this now? He asked. Because, she said, the nobles are preparing to replace me. They believe I've lost control, that the throne must return to blood command, not ancient artifacts. And you want me to do what? Command the dragon like a pet and scare them into obedience. I want you to choose a side. That stopped him cold. I'm not a soldier. I didn't ask for this. I'm not even sure what I am to that thing. You're the first to make it pause. The first to make it think. He shook his head. That's not power. That's luck wrapped in old code. No, she said softly. That's legacy. Theo turned away, needing space, needing clarity. But as he walked the length of the archive, something caught his eye, an image buried within one of the memory crystals. It showed an ancient Terran engineer, surrounded by a formation of biomech guardians. One of them looked unmistakably like Vorthix. And the engineer, he wore a crest Theo recognized, one he'd seen as a child on an old family heirloom. His hands trembled slightly. Back in his chamber, sleep eluded him. He sat on the cold floor, staring at a scrap of metal he'd pulled from the old engineering decks, a chip etched with the same symbol from the archive image. He thought of his grandfather's stories, dismissed by most as relic lore. He thought of his own life, scavenging parts on dying moons, fixing ships no one else would touch. And he thought of Vorthix, the way the beast had looked at him not with hunger or obedience, but familiarity. He wasn't just an accident. He was a remnant, a living key to a forgotten system. The next morning, the rebellion began. A faction of nobles launched an assault on the palace, claiming the queen had been corrupted by Terran influence. The sky turned crimson with aerial fire. Automated defenses failed in key sectors, sabotage from within. The Queen's loyalists scrambled, but they were outnumbered. Theo found himself running through smoke-filled corridors, guided only by his memory of the Citadel's layout. He reached the dragon chamber just as the attackers did. Two of them, Valkyrian elites in obsidian armor, stood before Vorthix, weapons raised. One of them activated a neural override rod, a tool designed to suppress beast-level AI in case of revolt. Theo shouted, "Don't!" But it was too late. The override pulse hit Vorthix square in the chest. The dragon roared, not in pain but in rage. Its eyes flared to molten gold. Wings snapped open, throwing shockwaves through the chamber. The attackers didn't stand a chance. In seconds, they were ash. Theo stumbled forward, smoke choking his lungs. "Vorthix," he coughed. "It's me." "Theo, stand down." The beast trembled, caught between instinct and command. The override signal had disrupted its balance. He took a risk. "Genesis Link," he said, firm and clear. "Reset to Terran command tier." A beat, then two, and the dragon went still. Slowly it knelt. Its breathing calmed. The override rod sizzled uselessly on the floor. Theo climbed onto its back. He didn't plan it. It just felt inevitable. The creature rose beneath him, lifting him like a crown forged of fire and memory. Through the broken ceiling above, the battle raged. But now, the tide had turned. He didn't speak. He didn't raise his arms like a savior. He simply guided the beast forward, because the truth had arrived on wings of flame, and the sky would never be the same again. Smoke coiled through the shattered skies of Zaraka like wounded spirits fleeing the dying breath of rebellion. From the back of the dragon, Theo saw what the world looked like when history unraveled. Ships, once symbols of Valkyrian dominance, burned in controlled descents. Noble banners, torn and bloodstained, flapped limply from cracked parapets. Below him, soldiers no longer fought for power. They fought to survive the consequence of forgotten truth. Vorthix soared over the palace, wings casting vast shadows across the crimson-lit marble domes. Theo clung to the embedded grip along the dragon's ridge, not from fear, but to anchor himself to the moment. His mind replayed everything. The override blast, the phrase that calmed the beast, the sudden clarity in the dragon's golden eyes. They weren't a weapon and wielder now. They were a convergence, two remnants stitched together by fate, code, and ancient bloodlines. As they descended into the central courtyard, Queen Zelvana emerged from the smoke, flanked by two of her last elite guards. Her robes were scorched, her crown missing, but her gaze remained sharp, unyielding even in collapse. She stared at Theo without speaking, the silence stretching between them like drawn steel. Theo dismounted. Vorthix remained still, protective but composed. "You won," she said, voice hollow. "No," he replied, stepping forward. "I didn't come to conquer." Zalvanna laughed bitterly. "Then what do you call this? Your dragon destroyed my fleet. The nobles are scattered. The palace, my empire, is burning. I didn't destroy anything. You built your rule on something you didn't understand. I just turned the lights on." Her eyes narrowed. "Do you want the throne?" "No," Theo said. "I want the truth. And maybe a chance to rebuild something real." She looked past him, toward the silent dragon. "They'll never follow you. Even if they fear you, you're still Terran." "I don't need them to follow me," Theo said softly. "I need them to stop lying to themselves." Zalvanna walked past him slowly, stopping just beside Vorthix. The dragon turned its head toward her, exhaling gently. "For years I ruled through control," she said. "But you lead through resonance. Somehow, the creature responds to you not because of programming, but memory. As though you've awakened something even deeper than obedience." "I didn't awaken it," Theo corrected. I listened. The queen turned, and for the first time, her voice wavered. I thought myself untouchable, until a mechanic reminded my empire what it means to be connected. He said nothing. Around them, the echoes of battle faded into distant rumble. The rebellion's momentum had collapsed under the sheer impossibility of Vorthix's allegiance. Those who had fought now gathered in broken formations, watching, waiting, for judgment, for mercy, or perhaps for direction. Theo stepped onto a high dais, once reserved for royal proclamations. The firelight caught the soot on his face, the ripped fabric of his jacket, the symbols etched into the dragon's side behind him. He didn't speak like a ruler, but the weight in his voice carried like one who had seen what lies beneath the surface of legacy. "You all saw what happened," he said, addressing the soldiers, rebels, nobles alike. "A creature bred for war, reborn in our own image, chose something different. Not out of fear, not out of command, but out of recognition." He let the words settle. "I'm not your king. I'm not even your enemy. I'm the reflection of a past you tried to bury. And like Vorthix, I've remembered what you forgot. That strength isn't forged in dominance, but in understanding." Some turned their eyes away. Others held his gaze. "I won't rule you. I won't rebuild your empire. But I will protect those who seek truth, who are willing to unlearn the violence you inherited." Someone in the crowd dropped to a knee. Then another. Not all, perhaps not most, but enough. The gesture was not of submission, but of acknowledgement. Queen Zalvanna stepped beside him, her presence no longer overshadowing, but joining. "We made a mistake," she said, her voice clear now. "We shaped power from bones we never examined. And now, the throne is empty. Because no one should sit above others without understanding what they carry." She turned to Theo. "What will you do?" He looked at the dragon, then the sky. "I'm going to find out how deep this goes." Zalvanna tilted her head. "Beyond this planet? Beyond the stars," he replied. "If Vorthix was built from Terran blueprints, there may be more like him. More systems hidden in old networks. More echoes of a forgotten civilization. And if you find them, then maybe I'll finally understand who we were, and who we could still become." Vorthix shifted behind him, wings stretching once before folding again. The beast, no longer a symbol of conquest, seemed almost ready, as if it too sensed a greater path unfolding. Preparations were swift. The queen, true to her word, abdicated. She established a provisional council to maintain order, composed of engineers, historians, even dissenters. Not everyone approved. Change never comes without fracture. But the dragon's silence was louder than their rebellion. It did not scorch cities. It did not rise in anger. And in that restraint, a new kind of fear and awe took root. Theo spent his final day in the workshop where it all began. He traced the old code again, eyes catching patterns he had missed before. The Genesis link was more than a command structure. It was a key embedded in every Terran bloodline that had once held creation power. It explained why Vorthix responded to him, why he could speak to systems no one else could unlock. He wasn't a chosen one. He was simply a carrier of a language long dormant. At dawn, he boarded a long-range scout ship retrofitted for deep signal exploration. Vorthix, too large for its confines, flew overhead as escort. Their journey wouldn't be fast or safe, but it would be real. As the ship rose from the planet's surface, Theo looked back one last time. Zaraka faded beneath them, no longer a prison, no longer a throne, just a beginning. He turned to the comm and activated the recorder. "This is Theo Marek, engineer, Terran Remnant. I'm initiating deep space Genesis trace exploration. I don't know what I'll find, but if there are others like Vorthix, others like me, I'll bring them back." He paused. "And if no one remembers who we were, Then I'll make sure they never forget who we are." Beside him, Vorthix flew with wings wide, eyes forward, unchained. Together, they passed into the stars, and history began again.